Live streaming is on.
Pants started live streaming. Yeah, so it was a good night. Wasn't quite what I was expecting. I was expecting it to be a kind of one on one or one on two, but actually it was a group of guys.
Oh, they bushwhacked you.
Yeah. Well, they kind of so there's the initial guy I met. Has got a mate. Is down in London who I've not managed to talk to yet. So he said, "Well, why not just come through to Edinburgh and have a chat?" And then I'm now surrounded by a group of Hong Kong expats and a Hong Kong lawyer. Hong Kong lawyer is brilliant, absolutely spot on, because he's a lawyer that writes software agreements.
That's our guy. Oh my god.
Yeah, I've got his contact, and he's already agreed to do a follow up. He went on, all the pain points that we know. He was just banging on about them. So the problem he's got is you can't trust coders to do what you ask them to do. So you've got to write these 50-page contracts, even down to location of buttons, and then they'll do what you want them to do. But I'm a software guy, so why am I designing it? It's expensive on their part. Usually, when it's is delivered, the company doesn't get quite what they want, sort of almost maybe what, and they've spent a lot of money. And it's like the switching cost is huge because every time you switch it, he does this for a living. So he and for multiple companies. I'm saying the switching cost is such that every time it's like, no, that company's not working for us. This is not what we asked for. You go to a new company, they always want to rewrite the code base.
Every time. You're like, why? Why?
Every time. So he's getting really quite sweaty about it. So I took him through Dreamcatcher, and he's like, "That's brilliant, brilliant." So you're saying that we have these discrete modules. He was calling it, kept on saying packets, but kept on saying modules. And I just buy modules, and if they don't exist, I kind of forward buy them, and they're created. Yeah, essentially it.
That's basically it.
He was incredibly enthusiastic about it. He was lukewarm about the getting revenue for putting demand out there from his side. He's saying, yeah, that's fine, but actually, from his point of view, they're buying software in order to get leverage inside of a company, which is like a big chunk of cash for them. If we end up getting $10, $100, $1,000, $10,000 in due course, it's like we're not really interested because we're spending.
Okay, what about it being open?
He liked that idea. He was he's all over GitHub. He's a great fan of GitHub and is talking about the use of GitHub to modularize and kind of publicize. And he was that was like, yeah, of course you would do that. Of course you would do that. In fact, one of the things he was mentioning is the use of open source, and the problem he's got is he's kind of advising. He's kind of technical lawyer, advising on guys who want a bit of software. I think it's usually on the client side that they don't like open source. So I'm kind of pushing, going, just pull it off the shelf. Why not? But I guess a couple of times they've had concerns that somewhere in the code someone's written something proprietary and they're going to get sued over time, etc. So there's a little bit of there was reticence on his client side about using open source because they're not entirely sure about the provenance of it and their legal responsibility for licensing. But he pushes that constantly, saying that's certainly the way to go, which is quite interesting in terms of a lawyer kind of pushing that side. What was the other points? I've written my list. Sorry, I didn't call
Did
last night.
did he say anything about the Hong Kong banking? Did you guys talk about the Hong Kong situation at all, or no?
No, not at all. I was just
Okay.
I was getting his view as a kind of software lawyer.
Okay, cool. All right. Sweet.
But
Okay, so he basically saw the revenue coming back to him as being he didn't really care because he's like, well, you know, we're gonna get lots of leverage from having just the software anyway,
right.
But did he care about giving away some of his revenue that he made from having had that piece of software?
No, didn't care about that at all.
Didn't care, so he was okay with that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. I would have been, if there was one thing for a staunch capitalist to push back on, it would be that.
No, because from his point of view, they're looking at the delta. So depending on the size of the company.
Oh, right. It only matters. It only matters the difference. Like if because they just look at it like the whole thing cost us X. If we have to give away a percentage of X every year, but we're guaranteed to get it, and it costs us less to start with, and it's kept up to snuff. I've been thinking of the ongoing revenue payments as maintenance fees that sort of guarantee you that the software will be upkept. I mean,
they're used to that. They're used to that. And I'll go into some of the points you made later on, which is germane to that one. But you're saying in his experience, the decision is to do it or not do it, and you do it if the delta is big enough that you're saying that the biggest barrier to it is management overhead. It's like headspace of the CTO or his team, so on. So if the delta is big enough, they'll just do it. They don't actually care too much what the delta is. So if the delta is large and the headspace required is relatively small, yeah, it's in. They don't look at exact style.
How did he feel? Did you ask him if he'd be up for us going into a company and just mapping all the possible deltas? Because the delta is highly dependent on the cost, right? And we're like, well, if we go in and map all the opportunity.
Yeah. I talked about that, not at great length. I was saying basically it's like, oh, so you're like business consultant type, guys who come in and map processes and that sort of thing. And you're saying that's kind of well covered at the moment. Sure, you guys could do it, but many others do it as well. Saying, wouldn't you be better off just like getting a business analyst or getting in contact with a business analyst inside of a company and just give over the processes, and then you can spot what the opportunities are, that sort of thing. But you're saying that's not a particular value add. That's someone going into a business and saying you can save money here, there, so on. You get those guys coming out your ears. But you're saying what you see.
That's good though. If we could hook into a couple of really good business analysts and be like, just give us all your discards, all your offcuts, all the things that aren't part of the main process.
Yeah, exactly. But he was really keen on the main things he was keen on was he thought the forward apps idea was brilliant. He was saying that's never heard of anything. He didn't quite understand how we could do it to start with, and then I took him through. He's saying, "Well, you're saying that I just put an idea up and it gets built. How does that do it?" So, well, you might need to incentivize it. All depends on how long you want to take. If you're not time sensitive, stick it up, and someone will come along and build it, and then you'll pay for it. But the idea of a low or possibly even no cost module or app was very positive to him. The thing, I'm just reading down the list. The next thing, he loved the idea of packetization, although he didn't get. I mean, maybe this is because I was showing him the website on the phone. He got very confused with packetized invention machines. Like, what was that? Or
Well, we better dump that then, because that's
he was saying, well, because I showed him that, you know, that first page right at the start, saying, because he asked me, so what you? I said, well, have a look at this. He's going, packetize. What's that? You're making packets. What was it? You're making boxes, or what? You say you're software, but you're like, what is this? So that's a tagline.
He's saying, that's good feedback.
Yeah, he was suggesting make it obvious. It's like, I don't know, you make software cheaper, or obviously not that, but he's saying make that more obvious, because I didn't really get that. But then when I was reading down on the idea that you're actually buying individual modules, you kept on calling it modules. He loved that, because he's saying quite often he's drawing up contracts for clients where really all they're doing, he's quite techie, but he's not a coder. But he's saying I can hold my own in Python and React and that sort of thing. So as a lawyer, he's actually quite techie. He's saying a lot of the time we're really only talking about changing 2-3% of the software because there's something specific that they want. And nevertheless need to go through this contract, and you've got an inevitable problem where every software development house wants to rewrite the entire code base, and so it ends up costing $100,000, $250,000 for just this 2-3%. So we love the idea of having these packets, these modules. I'll just pay for that. So that's really powerful.
Okay. Well, I think that packetizing thing is a natural instinct for a lot of people who try to do complex things. Like it's sort of the thing to do to get a large task done, is to break it down into bits. And
it's above a certain level of complexity, it's impossible not to.
So it's not really, it's fairly instinctive, but yet somehow software always magically ends up as this massive tub of lard that you're just like, it's stuck on my fingers. And then I went to talk to this other guy, and now he's got some of it stuck on his shoe.
Funny you should say that. Yeah, he was describing it as trying to wade through molasses sometimes.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And you're like, trying to pick up. How do you packetize molasses? I gotta say, one of the great mysteries of the industrial world is, how do you get a jar of molasses? Like, how do you get a machine that can fill the jar and then unsticky itself enough to put the lid on it with no dirt? When you buy it, there's no molasses outside the jar. And I swear to God, if you gave me $1,000 prize to do that, I don't know if I could do that for you, man.
He was a brilliant guy, actually. And I'm looking forward to the next call with him. But one of the things he was saying is, we did talk briefly about Hong Kong. And he's saying, and now he's over in the UK. I'm saying Hong Kong is ruthless, and you just everyone work. Everyone's at it. And over here, it's like okay, right. It's all soft. And so when I said basically wants to make this open, transparent marketplace where it's diehard Adam Smith, he went, oh, that's brilliant. So you're saying that bad software developers will just like disappear and good ones will be obvious? It's like,
pretty much.
He was very up for that, because going down my list here, one of his other main problems is selection of software devs or software development
and maintenance of the team.
Yeah, it's saying that is incredibly expensive. And it's not expensive in the search costs. It's expensive in the switching costs when they fuck it up. And by fuck it up, they could just fuck it up slightly, not understand it, not really get, not provide what the company was going. But you still have this team of 6 or 10 that are spending a 6-figure budget. And then the switching cost, when you realize, well, number one, it's going to take you a time to realize actually they're not doing it. So we don't really pursue. They don't pursue, although they go through these legal contracts. They don't. That's more for their onwards litigation risk. It's like we don't really pursue a software dev, a company that has failed to do it. We kind of just fire them and then switch. Saying that's so. Essentially, what you're doing is you're writing off, because again, huge software development company, look at the code base and go, what monkeys wrote this? So it's
and
actually
they're already coming in hot because the previous guys got fired, so they're like, oh, they
Right.
completely screwed it, right? So
yeah. So we're saying actually he was talking about the search space or the search costs as a whole. You need to consider the cost on the kind of wrong selection. And
okay, so include that in the search cost in our pitch. We're like, look, it's,
Right.
you can find companies. I mean, they're coming out your ears right now, but it's because the conventional model forces you to pick one. Consider the cost of getting that choice wrong. That's part of what we're breaking down. So you're only making a bad choice per packet, which is a much smaller amount. And the packet you don't pay if it doesn't get delivered. So what's the problem?
Yeah, and there's no option to rewrite the code base because it's like, no, I'm buying this packet.
Yeah,
just
it's like, and the choices that were being made were subject to a whole group because everyone who bidded for it had to sort of bid on the design and how it all sort of clicks in together. It's not like it's like, okay, we're off, and you shut the door and the outside world can't see in. It's like you get full visibility of what's going on the whole way through.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so I'm done. I'm just going down my list now.
What did the other guys? How many other guys were there?
So there was half a dozen there, but so just to give you a bit of context, it was in a restaurant, and it was kind of standing up, kind of drinks kind of thing. So it was more a social event. And of the others, one guy's number here was very keen, but the Hong Kong lawyer guy was the guy engaged with most because actually it was his job.
Yeah,
the other guy was a financier who was looking more along the lines of, well, okay, so this you say can go in funding, but when I'm looking at funding, he's a venture capitalist who's going, if I take a chunk of cash here, what I'm expecting is a 10x, 1/10 of the time, or that kind of ratio.
Well, you need it at least 1/9 of the time.
At least, otherwise you're fired. And using the cost for them as funders is again the overhead of selection of the idea.
So that's a different dimension of selection. That's interesting.
Yeah, and they don't mind their overheads. It's like, legals, if we're putting in 20 million, we don't care if we spend 250,000 on lawyers. But what we need to do is to find the and interestingly enough, they were selecting. He was saying they usually select on the head guy and his character and whether they think he said like quick, fast thinking, but also quick in terms of if he's come up with an idea, they look at the flash to bang of getting to the point of talking to funders. This is not really pertinent to us, but it was quite interesting. So it's like if a guy spent has an idea 20 years ago and he's only got to funders now, they look on that more dimly than if a guy had an idea 6 months ago and is getting to funders now. So it's that kind of pace of iteration that they like. So he was more on the funding side, but he's kind of big funding. It's like, well, I was talking to him about packets. He said, well, what's my overhead on buying a packet? How much is a packet? I said, well, it's you can have it as big or as small as possible, but if you have it smaller, you can have more unitary and you can reuse it more. It's going, well, okay, right. So I guess what we're talking about is a packet as an app, say, as a single app. In which case, that's what we'll usually just fund a company who's got a good idea for an app, and then we can see that 3-4 years from now there might be a possible exit. So in terms of big funding, he was going, I'm not sure how to get my head around this because it seems quite high overhead in finding these packets that you're talking about. Jim. yeah, we probably wouldn't be into that. But what you're suggesting is actually it's the buyers that are the funders here. The funders are really kind of off to one side. There's not going to be big funders. A big funder might.
Well, did you talk to them about the concept of being an actual investor, which is like setting up a company that's
Yes,
setting out
yeah.
to build? Yeah. What did he think
yeah.
of that?
He was much more comfortable with that. So he's saying, all right, okay,
yeah,
so
because these guys don't want to have to. They don't want to have to think every day. They want to do a bunch of thinking once, and then 3 or 4 years later, come back and
yeah. So on the funder side, packets are like that's too small, too modular. It's like
too small.
I guess he was saying it's a bit like I don't want to sit if we're setting up a trading company. I don't want to sit over the shoulder of a trader going that one.
Yeah.
What I want to do is to hire a team, let them get on with it, and tell them come back in 3 years and give me lots of money.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, we're saying, well, in that case, what you do is you do exactly that. You set up a company, put the money in, select your team, and then they work through this. Now, the thing that you've got to make a judgment call on is it cheaper and better to do it through Dreamcatcher than with all these other guys? And he was talking to we're in a 3 with the lorry guy at this point, and the lorry guy's going, he's nodding, going, oh, this is much better. This is much better. Like, is it? Yeah, it's much better. He's quite a small guy as well. He's really fun. There's like big white guy, small Chinese guy, and so the funder's going, yeah, I could see that, but someone would have to come to me with like an offer like that. I'm not going to go out and do this myself. Someone came with a management team, and if this network was, I could see.
I think that's a great proposition to backers. Hopefully, we can get some data through the platform of its success rates and overheads, and we'd want investors to be like, well, we'll put in the money, but you need to run your company as a Dreamcatcher company so that we can see what's going on if we want, and also we know that we're getting market rates and we're getting industry standard recommendations for all the aspects of the app that aren't unique, like 99% of it. So
yeah. There's interesting thing the funder guy said was it wouldn't need a big delta over the status quo from because I was suggesting, when he was saying, right, management team comes to you for funding to work on the Dreamcatcher. I said, would you go for that? I said, yeah. He said, it wouldn't actually require to make that judgment call. It wouldn't need a big delta over the cost and benefit of building software traditionally. Saying, I'd probably be looking for you guys to be 10% better, and at 10% better, that's going to be massive. So you're saying,
basically, you're saying if you can prove beyond a doubt that you're 10% better, then you basically eat the world. You would eat the world.
Yeah. You say you don't need to, because they're saying because the lorry guy is going, oh, this is so much better. This is like 2-3 times as good as doing it because of all the switching costs, etc. It's like you don't need to do that. And actually, if you came and said it's double or half the price, I wouldn't believe you. If you said it was 10% of the price and you had the figures of them, I believe you on that one.
Shoot, well, we got to get some data. It's always hard. People don't like to do things twice on purpose. In reality, they end up doing things about 4 or 5 times over in the software world, but they never admit it. It's just, how are we going to get the data that says that we're more performant?
It's a very good question.
It's been a long-standing problem, that one.
I think there's an inflection point here, isn't there? I think initially it's going to be kind of buyers and individuals, or people who organize individuals to do it. There's like a order of magnitude step up when we're talking about the funder. When I'm saying, I would, if someone came to me with a company of 100 guys who are all going to be working on Dreamcatcher, and you could show that you're 10% better than everyone else, I'd fund that. And it's at that point where you can show to someone with a lot of money to put into an organized company to work on the Dreamcatcher, that is going to be an order of magnitude step up. So I think there's like a phase transition. As soon as we can do that, then these guys will. Well, why wouldn't they? Because they're investing in software.
Okay, so the picture you're painting, the future looks like it'll be an avalanche switch. Like it'll be tough going at first. There'll be there'll be some people that are like, I instinctively know that that's better. I'm in, and there's others who are like, I got my system, it's working. And then we'll start to get irrefutable data that shows that it's better and by exactly how much. I mean, you and I.
And then on that phase transition, it'll be an avalanche.
Once we get that, that'll start to avalanche because it to be the fittest in a digital world that's connected in a global internet. What he's saying is that 10% better makes you like the winner. Like the like wipe the entire field out. You're like the potato. You're the potato crop of software developers. Like no one else grows anything else.
Exactly that. And the thing from his point of view, from the funders thing, is the 10% better is not just cost, it's speed, because it's talking about because you're reusing and packetizing, you should be able to. And I pitched them nowhere close to this, but I pitched them with the idea the vision is like the 24-hour app. I actually give them that scenario that I texted over, saying, there's an earthquake, and it's like, I need an app that does this, and this, and this, and this.
Yeah.
By the time you turn up on scene, you've got an app.
By the time you land,
you do that. You're saying you're going to be masters in the universe, but you didn't believe we could do that. I said, well, it's where we're headed.
Dude, I haven't even heard anyone start to claim that they can do next day delivery on software. I'm like, it's just such a foreign concept. It's like, right? But
the thing it triggered in his head is, that's well in the future, isn't it? But if you could get, as you're saying, 10% better, and you're saying it's not necessarily in costs, although cost and time are related, but speed. Is so much better because of the whole
speed
kind of
is
feel.
So much better, man.
And
I mean,
hell,
like 10%, even if you were 200% more, but you were half the speed and like 4 times the reliability of delivery, like there's no need for it to be entirely about being cheap. Being quicker and being like higher quality is worth a lot too.
That's the bit that the funder got really excited about. Because so one of the main problems they've got in funding is they have to look too far in the future. So it's like funding a company to do a thing that's going to arrive in 3 years' time. I don't know what the world's going to be 3 years' time. 3 years ago, I didn't know about the Ukraine war. It's like no idea what's going on. If you could like provide something in 6 months and it was right, then that's really attractive. So it's that speed to market, the flash to bang on it because they're judging based on what the market wants now, but having to like extrapolate a few years' time, then you're into crystal ball gazing, and that's where the risk comes, and that's why they need to hedge so much on. They only expect one in 10, but probably less than that. 1 in 10 actually making any money whatsoever. So 90% just disappear. I said, that's not great. It'd be much better if it was like.
Honestly, what's tragic is that if you took the duplication of effort that occurred between those 9 out of 10, you'd probably find a remarkable amount of overlap that no one's going to get to benefit from.
Yeah. So that's what the funder was really, really keen on the idea of getting a swifter response on an entrepreneur turns up with an idea for a widget. Knowing that widget is either going to work or not as fast as possible is one thing, but also as a funder, it's like, how long is this widget going to take to be made? And then can I see in that period what the world's going to be like? Is the world going to care about this, or is it going to be completely pointless at that point?
That's amazing. Once you can deliver faster than if you can deliver within the OODA loop. I know that's the wrong way to say it, but if you can, if you can deliver within the horizon, within the visible horizon, if you can deliver, you're going to hit your target every single time, rather than like load up, and then eventually the horizon will come, and we'll hope we're close enough that we can do some steering and we'll land. But if you're like, if you can hit under the horizon, that's a remarkable insight, because all these guys are shooting these like volleys out there over the horizon, right? But if you can, I mean, same day, you know what you can sell. Right?
Yeah, it's a slightly dodgy analogy, but he was giving it because gas prices have doubled again in the last 4 weeks up in Europe, and this is from, I think it's now 600% year on year. It's absolutely ludicrous. And you're saying, right, so should I buy gas futures? It's like, should I buy gas futures for 5 years out, 3 years out? I have no idea. The Russians might just turn the gas pipes back on, and I'm left with a whole bunch of junk stock. You're saying that is that kind of, that's that kind of thing. The further you have to look forward, the higher the risk, and so the higher the premium you're going to demand, the higher the failure rate you're going to have to sustain. Just that, it's like, should I buy gas futures tomorrow? Yeah, because it's going to go up, but can't. In terms of software, it's like, because it doesn't work that way. You say you're never going to do delivery, in a day of an app. But if you could, fucking hell, you'd be massively universe.
I love it when people say you'll never.
He's saying that. So in terms of funders, that was his main point. Was the risk they need to budget in to their deal based on how far away they need to judge this is actually going to be delivered. So it's not even delivery reliability. They just assume it's going to be delivered at some point. But the further that is, they kind of, right, I really don't know whether something's going to happen that's going to be overtaken by events, or it's going to move on. Right, next point. The Hong Kong guy, I think he's more techie than he was suggesting, but you say, how do you, so I've got a big bank and I want to integrate a change to like the back end. How do you get the back end integration into this one? Because it's all locked down, it's proprietary, and it's like Oracle's chunk of stuff, and Dell's chunk of stuff, IBM's in there. I mean, you're saying, how do you get into that? And I didn't have a good answer for that one, because it is quite hard to attach something onto a proprietary piece of kit that's already locked down.
If we have an API, fine, and a cooperative vendor, fine, but with no API, nothing's going to save you. Like, why did you allow yourself to be locked into a vendor?
But that's part of my answer. So my answer was, you just imagine these proprietary stuff. You're not going to go inside the proprietary box because you can't. But what you can do is leverage what that box is doing, by adding modules onto the side of it. So say if you had an Oracle database, all that's doing is getting the information there. If there's a specific specific question, for example, that you want to ask your database, and I've dealt with Oracle, you can go to Oracle and those guys will charge you through the eyes for a small change in order to get the piece of information. Or you can, through an API or an export, ask for this specific thing to be done. And
I mean, if we can see that inside the database, we can sort of jimmy up something based on the view of the database, but it needs to be locked to a particular schema. I've seen some companies actually encrypt the database on site of the customer and keep the password for themselves. So, and actually kick up a bit of a stink about allowing access to it, because they're like, why do you want to go in there? And you're like,
Yeah,
like to extend the functionality of your software.
it's not happening. But well, I was pointing to the point where, because it's proprietary, you do get charged through the eyes, and if there is any route that is publicized from that data set, then you're back into the Dreamcatcher world, and it's much faster.
Yeah.
I also pointed out. Sorry, I'll just finish that one.
Yeah.
I made the point that that's one specific application or a question on the application, but actually the whole point here is we're agnostic to what it's applied to. We're providing the marketplace, and it's the marketplace that figures this out. So we're not going in and saying, we can pull information from Oracle. We've got, we're saying a company that needs information to do this from their Oracle database puts it into the marketplace.
Okay. Well, can I have a go at answering what I would have said to that answer? It's a long-standing problem that these vendors lock in their clients with this proprietary stuff. Everyone has to talk at some degree, because you can't go buy like Oracle Bank and and that's all you ever need. So they all need to interconnect at some point. A great application for the Dreamcatcher's blockchain is to act as the system bus, where we would be communicating or handling the communications between these proprietary devices. So we could eventually start to, first of all, open up that data set in a much more accessible way to allow for innovation to occur on top of those streams of data as they pass between places. But ultimately, if you can fully surround a proprietary kit and you're in charge of everything that goes out and comes in, you've just written a spec to be replaced.
That's a good point. I like that. Because it's like, if you've got a black box that's expensive,
and
you completely control the ins and out, then why not change that black box for another box?
The box becomes a whole lot more pluggable once you can see everything passing in and out.
Yeah, I like that. That's
probably one of the things where
anyone CTO wants to risk their job on, but
once we can get like there's a few milestone apps or deployments that we want, right? And like being deployed as the system bus in it, in a couple of places is like it's a critical beachhead for us, because first of all, you can reduce the cost of doing integrations between these systems. I mean, I see a lot of jobs come up for like, hey, I want to connect this thing to this thing. Who wants to have a go? And you're like, ooh, right. And so if you you can reduce that whole n squared over 2 number of connections down to just like everyone connect to the Dreamcatcher, and then
it acts as a debabbilizer, basically.
Yeah, the debabbilizer sits there. Then you can suddenly make Dreamcatcher apps on top of those streams, because there's a lot of use that you could get if you just had access to the streams. So that's straight away. But most importantly, we can mask out the private data and start to generate an anonymized or pseudo-anonymous spec of what each box is doing for each customer, and then say, maybe this is a better function. We can start turning off functions in the black box, like being, we don't need this part of your service anymore. You can just slowly eat away at it, and then ultimately just be like, hey, someone came up with a fix, and the prize gets real big. Because if let's say we manage to install this bus in 100 companies, right? Like, we're already winning at that point. But then if we see the same black box in, say, 90 of the companies, and we know how much it costs, and we're like, if you could just punch out that black box, you would make a lot.
You know what? You're spot on there. The highest paid contractor in Scotland that I've ever met was a guy who was pulling $6,000 a day in, and he was just about to retire, so he's in his like kind of early 60s. And the reason he was pulling that in is I can't remember the model number. I think it was the 2700. Anyway, IBM, let's say 2700, right? a box that was built and sold back in the 70s and was still in the infrastructure of oil companies because it was like it worked. It's been working for years. Everyone's quite frightened of it. Nobody knows really how it works. And there's just one guy in the early 60s, saying $6,000 a day and I'll come in and fix it if there's a problem. And I think it's just like a 30, 40-year piece of kit.
Wow.
It's like, what's that doing in there? Running an oil rig. Or even having anything to do with an oil rig. Like, it's just, it's not the way to do it. But it's because of that unitary black box, proprietary secret. Like they're stuck.
And I've never heard of the concept of surround and take down. Like, there's no products I know that are trying to be like a smart bus, where they're saying that like the application is the bus actually. What we think are apps are only there because of how servers are. But if your bus could run apps too, you'd probably just leave them on the bus. Like why put them in a box? Why do that?
Why put a boundary around anything?
Yeah, but then so this would be part of our phase shift towards being able to publish live usage data, because if we're the bus, we can publish what's being done and being used with permission and with anonymization. But that starts to give innovators a better way to say, hey, I think this is worth this much, or ask questions more intelligently, ask questions using software and queries rather than just, hey, can I talk to your such and such a person? And so suddenly you basically paint all the targets in the current IT environment with these like little laser beams lighting them up for someone to come and hit, right?
Exactly. And just by giving transparency inside the black box. Oi, settle. Oi. So that's not the children, that's the dogs. Being transparent about it, the incrementality of it improves. And so there's this IBM box that's been there since the 70s, can only be replaced in one chunk.
Yeah, one big bang.
That's stupid. That really is stupid, isn't it?
Yeah, so the activation energy is too high. Yeah. That's why it never gets done and it just stays there.
That's right. Right. What's the go to the back end? Yep, done that for sounds legal. Did I mention? You mentioned standardized legals. Or talk through that point?
No.
Interesting enough for a lawyer, he thought that was a brilliant idea to standardize legals, because now this is probably because he's not looking for like billable hours on this. He's looking for retainers. So his job essentially is to be there and available when stuff goes wrong, and if someone wants a contract, write up the contract. But he doesn't get paid by the word on contracts. And he's saying a bunch of standardized legals would make life a hell of a lot better, a lot easier. And this is, again, where I brought into the conversation the information gradient, where coders know a lot about code, the business knows a lot about business, and they're asking the legals to kind of bridge that by writing wordage again and again and again and again. He's saying, it's a complete waste. Really, what you want is a good working relationship.
Right. You really want to have some trust.
So he's saying having, and described it like being part of a club. It's like if you join a club, you agree to stay by the rules inside that club. You don't like it, leave, join another club.
Yep.
And I go, well, that's a brilliant idea. He did point out actually, there's a movement inside of, I think it's property law, to do exactly that. So now, I don't know much about this other than the 5 minutes he was talking to me about it. But he's saying, yeah, there are movements inside of law firms to agree standard wording on a per clause basis to reduce the amount of time it takes in order to agree a contract. And he gave an example of property law at the moment, which is essentially buying a factory, buying a house, whatever. It's the same sort of thing most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And really what you want to know is, what's the dodgy bits. So the risk, is a zero-sum game. And so you do sometimes get people putting stuff into contracts that favors them and not you. And so a lot of his time is actually going around and trying to see where the delta is.
Right. Whereas if everyone just had standard agreed terms that have been used a lot, and you can actually instantly have presented to you the clauses you're thinking about, and it says how many people have used them and how much money has successfully changed hands governed by these clauses in aggregate, maybe it makes you care less about your bespoke contract.
Right. And you're saying some of the property contracts, he's not in property, but I think some of his mates are. He's saying some of the property contracts now, they're just referring to effectively a library. Like this clause, this one, clause, this one.
Yeah,
really easy to see where the delta is. And so you can actually get down to negotiating that delta.
Why it isn't like that already, I have no idea. But
it's a trend. He's saying it's going to take decades before they get it. It's going to take decades to get there, he reckons, because the law firms move very slowly and they're very conservative. And
they make a lot of money from not having it. Like they thrive because that system's not in place.
Well, you're saying there's a bit of a bifurcation in that.
Settle.
I'm sure it's not easy with the kids. There's a bifurcation where there's some companies that kind of make their money by he didn't actually say spitting out, but I think that was his idea. The hourly rate guys. And then there's other guys that are more they're looking for a relationship with a client that will last. And for companies, it's like they'll last generations. So ideally what you want is to be able to survive change of a CEO or two changes of a CEO. As soon as you get into that place, then that's the solid money. But on the flip side, the guys who charge hourly rates tend to get fired. And it's like on to the next one if someone, pisses them off or whatever. So, he's very much saying that good companies are the ones that want to go on generationally. Right. What else?
I'll take that as encouraging then.
Say again, sir?
I would take that as encouraging that our modular legal thing isn't a new thing. I'd be surprised if it was, and that if he thinks it's a good idea.
Yeah. The reason he's thinking it's going to take a long while is it's a brilliant idea. Everyone agrees with the idea, but they're having some difficulty coalescing around the actual wording on the clauses.
Yeah, that's hilarious. That's hilarious.
Like, everyone wants to do it.
Yeah. But what that's inviting is a dominant housekeeper, like Visa or MasterCard, where you're like, here are the rules and I will set them by a dictatorship force. They're approximately what you would have agreed to anyway, but you couldn't. And so now we're all going to operate under my house and I will charge a cut. So that's what that's inviting people to do.
Yeah.
So it's basically saying that, like peer-to-peer law is always going to be expensive and slow, but centralized law can be a lot faster. Like take Uber, for example. It's like, no, here's the contract for everyone. Yeah. But then, we're providing something that's a little bit more softened from that center dictatorship. It's like, it's central, but there's no one in charge. It's consensus based as opposed to individual peers all agreeing on every little thing. It's like we're making a dictatorial center and then getting everyone to agree to the dictator.
Yeah, and I pointed out on top of that, I was asking, well, how do you deal with versioning in these clauses? It's like versioning. So they have standardized some of them, and it's like if unless there's a ruling that makes it wrong, trying to get a change, you're talking about 10 years to get a change into a clause. It's like, and then everyone switches over. So there's no useful concept of incremental improvement where you can actually clag into the right versions, get the same effect, because really what you want to know is someone hasn't snuck in a must
A
not
bug.
instead of must,
Yeah.
but there's no concept of versioning. It's all by kind of annual meeting and very slow.
Oh wow. Honestly, lawyers are like software programmers that didn't get the computer. Like,
Isn't it? Like doing everything by hand.
yeah. It's like, we know you were the first computer scientists, guys, but there's some new tools that come on the scene, and
speed this up. We really can. Right, and that's it really. These are the notes I wrote last night.
All right, cool.
So summarize. Was it the main point? I wrote this down on the pen. The main point you kept on banging on is like software development is expensive, risky, time-consuming, and always wrong.
That is so pessimistic.
It's quite cynical. It's like, yeah, you disagree? No, not really. Yeah,
Can't fault you there.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the end of my notes from last night.
Okay, so what now?
What I want to do is because the
Are they dying? Are they okay then?
I don't know. I don't know what's happened. Something's happened. What was I about to say? Yes. I want to produce the packet for last night. So I want to capture this using this conversation so that we have that. Could just be this conversation, right? Just pull it down, and get it transcribed. Where's that? And then I'm still back on getting Rex's modules together. So the DPL, need to get the not the modules, the contract. It's the bit that needs to be done. I don't think there's any modules.
Basically, the contract based on the Word document that we. Okay.
Yeah. So the DPL, I'm happy with. I will need to trace through the references back to the dictionary and make sure that they're using the right terminology, because there's references, but all the references are correct. So the DPL is self-consistent. Now I need to do the contract. Shouldn't take that long. And there'll be lots of spaces to put stuff in. I don't think there's any modules needed. Maybe an NDA, but I've already got an NDA written. I proposed one. Just as an example, that was an example module. So unless there's any other modules needed, then then we can get to the point, which is what we need by the end of the month, which is a printout. You sign that doc PDF.
Cool.
So that's the next piece. But I want to commit this to a packet now, while it's all still fresh, as opposed to a few days, and I'll have to go back and have more overhead trying to figure out what the hell I was talking about.
Yeah. Okay. When's your next pitch? Have you got another one in the pipe?
Yeah, I've got I've got two, possibly three in the pipeline now.
Sweet.
So there's the financier, London financier. There's a deeper dive with the Hong Kong lawyer. And there's the Spanish law guy that I was talking about ages ago, which is he's still very keen to put stuff in. So I've got those three coming through.
Okay, cool.
I'm I'll try to use the contacts I made last night to like network into other areas. But
Okay.
the one thing I found is Edinburgh's a brilliant place to network on a Friday night because it's, you know, you got all the major banks, all the private banks, so firms, just, you know, coming down onto Rose Street,
Yeah.
and you just go and chat to random people, which is where I got this set from. Like, it's like, who are you?
Cool.
Oh, yeah. So probably I'll do a few more, but I got another 3 in the line. I think my target was to get 6 in total. So
That's awesome.
I said I'd be
Right.
happy with. Obviously, if there's more, I'll get more. But
Okay. So after that pitch, before that pitch, you had a bunch of things in your head that you were worried about. After that pitch, what's changed?
It's reinforced how good this idea is. It's pointed out that some of our messaging on that site needs to be clear because it needed me in person to actually explain it. The idea of secondary revenue, it's like, okay, yeah, it's like that's not going to be a major thing, so maybe we shouldn't like make that as one of the major points. It's just, it happens, okay, but that's not what people fund it. The big plus is an insight on the funders side in terms of that, you know, order of magnitude increase in the phase transition. And in summary, I think we've got, again, every time we do a pitch on this one, there's no reason for these guys to blow smoke up our arse. They've honestly never met them before last night, and they're saying, well, one of the guy was, you know, the Chinese guy was really, really keen, and the funder was kind of saying, come and contact me when it's you've got, you know, evidence. But that's again reinforcement that this idea is meeting a real need. And I want to say again that software dev is expensive, risky, time-consuming, and wrong. That's kind of what we're tackling. It's like if we can do a bit 10% better. So, in answer to your question, I think this is just reinforcing that this idea can be consumed and understood with a reasonable short pitch, but the messaging on the site can't be can't necessarily get the point over without intervention.
Okay.
So there's a bit of thought there, but face to face is like, you know, the penny dropped within 5 minutes, and then it was all backwards and forwards discussion.
Okay, so there's still the website itself does not provide a penny drop.
Yeah, and it's like I'll look through and I'll put some more thought into that, but it might have been the environment. Just remember, it's like in a bar showing him a phone saying, "Do this." He's Chinese, and so he'd been knocking it back, but he was really hard. And so he's reading it as going, right, how about you just tell me what this is? Like,
Yeah.
so, bit of work to be done there, but not immediately. Again, this is just one data point on that site. I think there's work to be done.
Okay. You were worried about. There was something that you said you were worried about. Your main worry, like a couple of weeks back, and it was like, I don't know. I forgot. I should have written it down, but it sounds like.
Well, if I can't remember now, then it's obviously not a major worry.
It's dissolved. Yeah.
It's not something that's big.
What's your new favorite worry?
I don't have.
Oh, you don't have one. That's not very Scottish of you, is it?
No. I'm thinking. No, I do have one. It's. I think the network effect is going to be very powerful, but building a network is really difficult.
Yeah.
Once it gets going, then it's, you know, it's ripped out your hands, and, you know, it just streams on. but actually going to a guy like this lawyer and saying, put your business through Dreamcatcher. There was he wouldn't have signed if he had sitting there going, yeah, I've got this 250 contract. He wouldn't have signed then and there, because why would we? It's like, where's your evidence? Where's anything? So it's that bootstrapping thing. It's probably the thing I'm most concerned about that. But that's just cost of doing business. That's where we're at. There's no way around that. There's nothing fundamental. It's just one of these jobs to do. But it's going to be a difficult one. And once it gets to that point, I don't think it'll be once we've got the evidence that we're not bullshitting, guys like this will just come on.
Yeah, it'll be unstoppable, eh? So we really got to focus on getting some proof, which thankfully, given that we have a proof system built in, shouldn't be as hard as a traditional company.
Well, we can